Pre-Calc students. We are going to be doing one section from chapter 10. The section that we're going to be doing is section 10.5, which is known as partial fraction decomposition. Initially, I was going to do unit 9, which dealt with the permutations, combination stuff. But after talking to some of the teachers over at Almond, they felt it was more important that I focus on partial fraction decomposition and then go on to chapter 2, which is our calculus chapter. If we have time at the end of the semester, then we will go back to unit 9. So that's kind of where we're at. So for 10.5, partial fraction decomposition. Example 1 is old stuff that you've learned how to do before, because I kind of want to explain what partial fraction decomposition is, so I'll show you that after this example. So let's say that you had to combine something like 3 all over x plus 4 plus 2 all over x minus 3. All right, and you've had to do something like this in the past. When you combine these, since they are fractions, they need a common denominator. And so the common denominator would just be multiplying these two things together. So this guy over here needs an x minus 3, so we multiply the top and bottom by x minus 3. And this guy over here needs an x plus 4, so we're going to multiply the top and bottom by x plus 4, so that we have a common denominator. We end up with 3 times x minus 3 plus 2 times x plus 4, all over our common denominator of x minus 3 times x plus 4. All right, and then from there we can distribute the 3, distribute the 2, and combine like terms. So you get 3x minus 9 plus 2x plus 8 all over this denominator of x minus 3, x plus 4. And then you can combine the x's together. You get x and minus 1. That's totally wrong. 5x, I apologize, not x. 5x minus 1 all over x minus 3 times x plus 4. All right, and then that's your answer. What we're going to do is we're going to be going in reverse. Okay, you're going to be given this, and we're going to be rewriting it as the addition or subtraction of two or more fractions. Okay, so let me write that down. Partial fractions is where we go in reverse and find two or more fractions that add up to the whole. So I'll show you how that's going to work, but essentially we're going to start with a single fraction, and then we're going to break it up into the sum of two or more fractions. There are 3 different types of partial fraction decomposition problems that we're going to deal with. And actually, I'm only going to focus on 2 of them. So while there are 3 types, we're only actually going to do 2 of them. Normally we do 3, but with the e-learning stuff, we're just kind of making cuts where needed. So the first type that we're going to focus on is where the denominator has non-repeated linear factors. Denominator has non-repeated linear factors. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So this is going to be example 2. Let's say that you need to decompose x all over x squared minus 1. Okay. What's going to happen is our denominator is x squared minus 1. We can easily factor that. All right, so this is the same thing as saying x all over x plus 1 times x minus 1. Okay, and so now if you look at the denominator, I put denomination. Denominator has non-repeated linear factors. So if you look at it, we have linear factors, because x to the first is obviously linear, and they're not repeated, meaning x plus 1, x minus 1, they're different. It's not like we have an x minus 1 and an x minus 1. All right, so this is going to definitely be linear and non-repeating. All right, so that's the first type that we're going to focus on today. So what's going to happen is we know that this thing is going to equal something, so I'm just calling it A, all over the one part of the denominator, x plus 1, plus it's going to be B all over the other part, x minus 1. Because we know that eventually, if you got a common denominator, it would be x plus 1, x minus 1. So we know it's going to be this. What we need to figure out is what these guys are. Okay, so these are kind of our unknown constants. Unknown constants. All right, and so I'm going to teach you one way to do it today, and then in the next video I'll show you an alternate way to do it that won't always work, but it is a little bit shorter. But for today we're going to do it this way. So what you're going to do, the very first step, is you're going to clear the fractions. Clear the fractions. All right, so we have this, let me rewrite it, x over x plus 1 times x minus 1 equals a all over x plus 1 plus b all over x minus 1. And what we're going to do is clear the fractions by multiplying by this denominator here. So we're going to multiply this whole thing by x plus 1, x minus 1. When we multiply the first term, you're just going to get x. And the next one, the x plus 1s will cancel. You'll be left with a times x minus 1. And then when you multiply by the third term here, the x minus 1s will cancel. You'll be left with b times x plus 1. All right, and then what we're going to do, step B here, is we're going to group like terms. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute. I get x equals a times x minus a, all right, plus b times x plus b. And what I'm going to do is group the like terms. So I'm going to put the terms that have the x's by each other, and I'm going to put the terms that don't have x's by each other. I'm going to leave this x that's on the left side all by itself for right now. It's just going to stay where it's at. So I'm going to put the ax plus bx together, and then the negative a plus b together. I just kind of move them around. From here, what's going to happen is I'm going to factor out an x from this first set of two terms. All right, so I have x equals, and then I have a plus b times x, plus, and then I have this negative a plus b. Okay. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called equating the coefficients. So I'm going to equate the coefficients, I'm going to abbreviate that a little bit, coefficients of x and x to the 0. Okay, so on the left side here I have x to the first. This is like saying x to the first plus technically 0, x to the 0. All right, x to the 0 plus 0 x to the 0 is the same thing as just x. All right, I'll show you what I'm doing here. And on the right side I still have a plus b times x to the first, and then I have this negative a plus b, and technically we could put that times it by x to the 0, because x to the 0 is just 1, so multiplying by 1 doesn't change it at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the coefficients of x to the first and set them equal to each other. Look at the coefficients of x to the 0 and set those equal to each other. And then we're going to solve for a and b. So the coefficient of x to the first here is 1, and the coefficient of x to the first here is a plus b. So we're going to set a plus b equal to 1. And then for the x to the 0s, we have a 0 for that coefficient and negative a plus b. We're going to set negative a plus b equal to 0. All right, now I can't solve for a or b directly. I need to do a system. All right, so we're going to solve the system. What's nice is I don't even need to multiply by anything. If I stack them one on top of the other and I add them together, the a's cancel. I'm left with 2b equals 1, and when I divide by 2, b is going to be 1/2. All right, so that's pretty nice. And then just plug it back into whichever one you want to do. If you plug it into the a plus b equals 1, all right, we know that b is 1/2, so a plus 1/2 equals 1. So a ends up being 1/2 as well. They won't always be equal to each other, but in this particular problem, they are. And then our final step is just going to be rewriting it. Okay, so what we had started off with, way back here at the beginning, was x over x squared minus 1. So x all over x squared minus 1 equals. And then we had said, a over x plus 1 and b over x minus 1. So a, 1/2, all over x plus 1, plus b, 1/2, all over x minus 1. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to get rid of the fractions or anything like that. That is it. That's what you're going to do. Okay. So those are the first types of problems that we're going to deal with as far as fraction decomposition goes. And then the next video we'll do a little bit more with it and then also talk about the second type. All right. Thanks for listening.